Alrighty, so let's do this. We're going to talk about we're going to talk today about where things go for SQ. The screen we're looking at here is Reaper. For those who have signed to the channel, feel free to say hello on the live chat. Any questions, feel free to again ask on the live chat. That is what it is. Chat. Any questions, feel free. Okay, so a lot of times, a lot of people have discussions about what things sound like in their vehicles. This is usually, oh, well, I don't think that this song stages correctly in your car, or, your violins sound too bright, or, you need to drop down 263.4 hertz because that's affecting your male vocals, or some other, let's be honest, nonsense garbage that usually is kind of like, I don't know, it's unqualified opinion. And so people are like, oh, but it's subjective. You don't know, you can't know what this can be because it's all subjective. Music is subjective, yada yada blah blah. The aim of today's little tests is just the aim of today's lesson is to show you guys that there actually is a truthful source, and there is actually a way to interpret that source so that no longer will you need to ever just listen to a random person and just blindly take their opinions. So the first things first, this stream has been set up so that the audio from the computer will be very visible, will be very easily visible, sorry. Let me just resize this window so that it fits. Brilliant. Gonna have a bit of black space, but that's all right. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we are going to look at basic audio concepts, if you will. Okay. And what we're going to do is we are literally going to look at just, let's see if I've got all right, you know what, let's just use this. That's really weird. All my here we go. So I want to load this song into the page. Great. Now what you'll see is this song that's been loaded, and at this point you'll probably think to yourself, oh great. Now keep in mind that obviously normally when you load this stuff, you're not actually, when you play this music, you're not actually able to see the waveforms. So normally people would just be like, oh, it's our interpretation. Let's see if we can't fix that perception a little bit. feel free to ask a question in the comments at any time. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to look at and just listen to this song, Chant by 4Play, and we're just going to play the first 6 seconds of it. Great, let's just play that again because I probably like that intro. This is actually one of the songs on my test track. Great, so we've heard that. All's well and good. Nice drums. Now, I'm just going to hazard a guess here and take the mickey out of people who are in car audio or audiophiles, and they're going to be like, oh, that's a bass drum. It needs to have sub bass and a lot of like mid or kick bass, and your woofers need to be like air cannons that go and then there's highs. I heard some chimes, so I think your tweeters need to be more high, whatever that means. So let's really just look at this and analyze this section. Now, the first thing you have to understand is that stereo is basically left and right. And even though that might sound really obvious, this little knob here that you can see that I'm hovering over, the pan knob, that controls how much power is sent to left and right channels. Obviously, when all the power is sent to the left, you get just left. And obviously, when all of it's sent to the right, you get the right. Now, this blend of left and right is precisely how the human ear interprets stereo information, right? So if I start from the left and I sweep it over to the right, okay, that's just basically, the timing, the power, the amount of sound coming out of the left and the right channels, and the interplay of that is what locates something in the stereo field. But what's important is also things like the difference in timing between when something comes out of the left and right speakers. And that's what gives us things like depth rather than just simple left and right. But we'll deal with that later. Right now, I just want to talk about some of the more simpler concepts in SQ that, again, as I said, to remove that the subjectivity excuse. On that note, I just like to say that subjectivity is a really dumb word, because a lot of people I find use that as an excuse for ignorance. Oh, music, you start talking to them and then they're like, oh, music it's all subjective, mate. No, I believe that music is personal. We all have personal tastes, but that doesn't make it subjective. So, for example, 40 degrees is really bloody hot in Australia, but in the tropics, where it's hot and humid, we would agree that that would be hotter in a sense. So it's not really, you can't say, oh, the experience is subjective. It's relative and it's personal, but it's not subjective. And so what we need to do is we need to establish a standard for everybody to basically understand and basically go, okay, well, this is what we're talking about. So with this song, the first thing we need to do is look at what's in the song, right? Now, a lot of people may know that bass is usually panned in the center for the main reason that back in the day when they had records, like 12-inch vinyl records or 7-inch 45 RPM records, or even the shellacs or whatever, because there was limited groove space available, people would generally just studio engineers would pan the bass in the middle so that the same amount of low frequency energy was coming out of both speakers, which basically gave the impression of more bass. And you can even listen to that if I pan like hard left, for example. You hear that drum kick, and then if I pan hard right, and you'll hear the drum kick. But obviously if I play both at the same time, you'll hear all the drum kick. So you might assume that that kick is in mono, but remember that mono is the same information in both channels. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this again in stereo, but you can see these level meters, they're not exactly the same. And if I say, for example, highlight just this section, and this is going to be really annoying, and I apologize for that, but if I highlight this section and play it looped, you can see that that's not level. So clearly this isn't a pure mono signal. There's ambience and maybe a little bit of panning and microphone positioning and a whole bunch of studio techniques to basically create a non-stereo source. Now this is usually with, you know, jazz and, you know, orchestral recordings. You probably won't find non-mono drums in, say, for example, hip-hop, but it's very rare that a hip-hop piece is used as a SQ test track in a competition. Now I want to keep talking about this kick, because a lot of people would be like, oh, well, you know, your bass or your sub or whatever needs to have more impact. Well, is that true? We need to look at that. So what we'll do is we'll just check this section out that I've highlighted, and we're going to go to what we call a spectrometer or a spectrograph. And what we're going to do is just okay, so see here. All right, I'm going to add one more tool to this. Real frequency spectrum analyzer. Great. So okay, I'm going to try and stop that exactly on the... Alright, so here we go. We see we've got some stuff here. We see some energy at the 50 Hertz. So the peak here is probably around 50. And then it sort of goes down, and if we make the FFT sharper, you can see in fact that it is somewhere around 50-60 Hertz. Now the point is that 50 Hertz is not purely subwoofer territory. It is, oh, you probably can't see this window, hold on, let me just change the I'll need to change the view for you. Got to change the view. Display capture, okay. Great. So we're going to see here where my mouse is here. That's the 50 Hertz, right? And basically at that 50 Hertz channel, you see, sorry, use that, when you raise the FFT, you'll see that there's a peak there, and that, in all honesty, is most probably going to be the drums. Now I've set the floor of this to about minus 96 dB, which is about the dynamic range of 16-bit audio. So no excuses there for basically not, saying, oh, well, there's greater dynamic range, yada, yada, blah, blah. So what we're trying to say here is that this kick is somewhere around the 50 to 60 hertz region in terms of energy and frequency. So what does this mean in real life? It means that if this song was on the test track and you played, this was being played, and that was under assessment by the SQ judges, and then after hearing that piece, after hearing that section, they said to you, oh, your sub needs more work because I want to hear more lows out of that kick drum. Not only is the judge speaking a load of bull, because first of all, there was no lows, especially the 30 hertz, because under 30 there was nothing there, right? But also 50 is usually, for most SQ setups, woofer range. Now I'm not saying that the sub can't contribute to the 50 hertz energy spectrum, but that punch is probably more of a test of first primarily the woofers and then how the sub fills into that. But to expect the sort of low frequency, like THX rumble from this is impossible because it's not in the recording. Remember, even though, the interpretation is personal, it doesn't excuse the fact that this kick drum does not have any real energy below, 40 hertz. And so you can't say it needs more bass coming impact when that impact was not there. Let's keep moving forward. Okay, so we're hearing some, sort of like chimes or bells. Now, see here, even though there is a guitar section, I'm going to drop it down a bit so it makes it easier to see. Okay, so I've stopped it at a section where I believe it should have some chimes. Now, people generally might think, oh, chimes, well, that's, highs, that's a tweeter thing. And actually looking at the spectrum, let's look at the spectrum analyzer. We're seeing that it's, a bit of energy around 2.5 kilohertz. Let's look at the spectrum analyzer and just see what we get. So yeah, I mean, look, there's some energy. Looking at the bottom, we're looking at the bottom here. The bottom right with the numbers. So we're getting some energy around the there you go, just saw that, that was great. So we're getting some energy starting from around the 2K region all the way to the 10K region, but keeping in mind that this song is limited at past 16K. So first of all, if someone says, if someone starts talking about 18, their ears are really sensitive and they're hearing, 18, 19K in this song, it's a load of bull because this song does not have any 19K information. It doesn't even have any 17K. It ends flat out at 16 kilohertz, right? Now those chimes or that rain sounding instrument, we can see has energy between the 2.5 to 10K region. What does this mean? If you look at the graph here, it means that that primarily concentrates around the 2 to 5 region. And so actually, instruments are largely a test of mid-range. It's largely a test of mid-range, and so therefore it is a combination of both the top end of your woofer crossover frequency and how well it integrates with your tweeter's low frequencies, relatively speaking. But it definitely is not so much a test of, your frequency extension of your tweeters. Just because it's a higher sounding instrument relative to everything in the passage, it doesn't mean that it's, most people will be like, these are chimes, or these are hi-hats, or these are cymbals. That's a pure tweeter territory. It isn't. And we'll keep listening. So I'm just going to loop this section, this snare. And you can see that there's actually a fair bit of energy there. Now if I keep looping this a little bit. Perfect. So you can hear that there's So you can see that from the numbers below that's minus 50, minus 60. So there's some high energy, but where it starts getting really red is basically around the 30 mark. Even this snare, right, has energy at 500 hertz. So the snare has, it covers a wide mid-range. And this is one of the secrets of SQ. The secrets of any good recording is not the lows or the highs, but the mid-range, which contains the most information. And what this would mean is that if you're in a 3-way, it would be testing the integration of the 3-inch mid or the 4-inch mid with your tweeters and your kicks. Or if you were going 2-way, it would be a test of your woofer and the integration of the woofer with the tweeter. But having said that, again, we're talking, basically a lot of this stuff is about the mids, right? And so what we need to really consider at this point is that, should we keep saying that this is all subjective? No, because as I've just shown you with these two very quick examples, the truth is always in the recording, and there are always tools to look at what is in the recording. Now, I haven't talked about, stereo image, whether this, and that'll be for another time, whether this sound should be, a little bit left or a little bit more right or dead center or all the way to the extreme right of the stage. But it's very important for starters, when people are talking about tonality, which is the easier thing to understand, that, you can't assume that hi-hats are tweeter territory, because actually a lot of it is owed to how the woofers are, what is powering the woofers, and how the whole, that whole particular branch of the system is tuned. And you'll see, and you'll see through all this that, especially in the spectrum analyzer, that there is, the recording is never flat. There is no such thing as flat, because music, as we know, is about harmonics. And so basically there's no such thing as pure tones. The only pure tones you can really get are from synthesizers, not from real instruments. And this is why it's very important to have as linear a frequency response as possible, so that your playback isn't affected. Because if you, I'm just going to play this, and you'll see this jump, right? Now I'm just going to turn that audio down a bit, and you can see that at no point during any of this playback, no matter how smooth the music sounds to your ears, it never actually is flat. What this means, if I can put this in a slightly easier way, of understanding is basically, let's say you have, numbers, and like for example, your first number is 1, and your second number is 2, and your third number is 3. You don't want your system to be like -1, +2, -4, because the numbers at the end of that will be completely different to the 1, 2, 3 at the start. What you want is for your system to be all zeros, so that your system theoretically neither takes away nor adds to the playback. What you get is what is in the recording. And so that's why frequency response of your SQ system should be linear. Now, some people might say, oh, well, that just means flat. However, and that would be great if our ears weren't ears and we heard flat like a small diaphragm condenser microphone. But unfortunately, our ears are ears and don't have linear listening. That's a subject for another time, how humans hear, and psychoacoustics and acoustic perception and all of that. But just for today, hopefully you guys have seen that the recording itself is not linear, that there is no such thing as subjectivity, and the more we know about the songs themselves, the less we can rely on some random guy who comes up to you and gives you some piece of advice that may or may not be true. That's all for now. Thanks very much, and I'll catch you guys next time.